the house that still knew their names. After Eleanor Hayes died, Robert learned something he had never been taught in all his 64 years. Silence could grow. It did not arrive all at once. It settled slowly, like dust on shelves, like evening shadows stretching longer each day. It lived in the hallway where Eleanor once hummed, and in the kitchen where she used to lean against the counter, watching him pretend to cook. The house in suburban Chicago had been theirs for 4 decades. They had painted its walls together, argued gently over furniture, raised children who now lived far away with families of their own. Now, the house belonged mostly to memory. On this particular evening, rain tapped softly against the windows. The power had gone out just after sunset, leaving the neighborhood unusually still. Robert lit a small lamp and sat in his favorite armchair, the same one Eleanor used to tease him about. "You're going to sink into that chair one day and never come out," she'd say, smiling. He missed her smile most of all. Robert opened a book he had already read twice. Familiar stories felt safer now. He had just turned a page when he heard it. A sound. Soft. Distinct. A drawer closing. He lowered the book slowly. The house often made noises. It was old, but this was different. This sound had intention, a beginning, an end. Robert stood and listened. Nothing followed. "Just the house," he murmured, though he wasn't convinced. He walked into the kitchen. Everything was in its place. Doors locked, windows secure. The rain continued, steady and calm. Feeling slightly foolish, Robert returned to his chair. That was when the grandfather clock chimed. His heart skipped. The clock in the hallway had not worked since Eleanor's funeral. He had never fixed it. Somehow it felt wrong to disturb its silence. Yet now it chimed. Once. Twice. Robert stood again, slower this time. He placed his hand against the clock's wooden frame. Cold, solid, real. Then the radio clicked on. Static filled the room. Robert turned sharply. The radio had stopped working the previous winter. The static shifted, softened, then became a voice he knew as well as his own breathing. "Robert." He gripped the back of the chair. "Don't be afraid," the voice said gently. His chest tightened. "Eleanor," he whispered. The radio crackled. "You still forget to lock the balcony door before bed." He laughed softly through sudden tears. She had said that every night. A memory surfaced. Eleanor standing in the doorway, hair loose around her shoulders, wearing one of his sweaters. She would look at him with mock seriousness and say, "One day, Robert Hayes, you'll let the whole world wander in." "I never did," he said out loud. "Not really." The radio voice continued. "Do you remember the box in the attic?" Robert closed his eyes. Of course he did. The attic smelled of dust and old winters. The box held letters, photographs, and small objects from their early years, things Eleanor had carefully saved. After she died, Robert couldn't bring himself to open it. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step creaking like a hesitant thought. The attic light flickered on. The box was exactly where it had always been. Inside were photographs. Eleanor laughing on a beach, Eleanor asleep with her head on his shoulder during a long train ride, Eleanor in their first tiny apartment, pointing proudly at burnt toast. At the bottom lay a cassette tape, written in Eleanor's handwriting, "For Robert, when you feel most alone." He carried it downstairs. The radio had a cassette slot. The tape clicked into place. Eleanor's voice filled the room, clear, warm, unmistakably alive. "If you're hearing this, then you stayed. You didn't run from the quiet." Robert smiled. "I asked someone to repair the clock and the radio. I wanted the house to speak when it needed to."
He shook his head gently. "Always planning," he said. "I remember the night we moved in. You said the house felt empty. I told you it just needed time to learn our names." Robert closed his eyes. Another memory unfolded. They were younger then. Rainy evening, bare walls. They sat on the floor eating takeout, Eleanor resting her head against his shoulder. "This house will grow old with us," she had said. "Promise we grow kind, too." "I promise," he had replied. On the tape, Eleanor's voice softened. "I loved the way you reached for my hand at night, even after all those years, even when you were half asleep." Robert's breath caught. He remembered that, his hand finding hers in the dark, her fingers squeezing back, wordless and certain. "I don't want you to live only with memories. I want you to live again. Invite someone over. Make tea. Let laughter return." The tape paused briefly, then resumed. "Look under the clock." Robert walked to the hallway and found an envelope taped discreetly inside the case. Inside was a note, written carefully. "Call James. Visit the lake. Fix the balcony door. Fall in love with life again." The tape clicked off. The radio fell silent. The clock chimed once more, then stopped. The power returned moments later, lights flickering back on. Everything was ordinary again, except Robert. He picked up the phone and dialed his old friend James. As it rang, Robert looked around the house. It no longer felt empty. It felt awake. And somewhere deep in the quiet walls, love lingered, not as a ghost, but as a promise kept.